enorme prazer estar aqui nesse último dia da 14ª reunião de Antropologia do Mercosul, com duas figuras proeminentes, grandes nomes da antropologia internacional, o professor Bisharat, o professor Roberto de Lima, University. A chance encounter that resulted in a dialogue that traveled through the work of time, culminating decades after that first moment in a solid academic cooperation that unfolded in intellectual partnership in the consequent incorporation of this man of America, colleagues, to the group of international research of the ICHF approved and created in 2009. Before its approval with the research founded Agents of Brazil. The needs of two people culminated in development for many of a new generation who were to benefit from George Austin of Kant doctoral studies and the other colleagues were here in the USA for part of their doctoral studies, os doutorados sanduíche. And the success of this conversational enterprise was only possible because these two tropicalists, espírito tropicalista, desses dois seres humanos, share and understand that knowledge is founded in mutual respect, reciprocity, and a spirit of symmetry and recognition of the equality of position in the world. No assumption undertaken between the imperial, between a colonizing nation and colonized nation. But in the face of admiration, it was possible to dilute the cisma, diluir a cisma. Normal in type of international cooperation enterprise, science would tend to label for their use words princípio da racionalidade narcisista, onde Narciso acha feio o que não é espelho. Narciso finds out ugly what it's not admired. The principle of reciprocal symmetry applied. The spirit of the whole prevailed and allowed the bust of cooperative work by contrast. Too important and vigorous for anthropological work. After all, a psychoanalyst is as the science of the inconscious. Is not anthropology the science of comparison? Que mistura o francês com o inglês e aí fica uma loucura, né? For us at ICHF, PPGA, Programa de Pós-Graduação em Justiça e Segurança, PPJS, NUFEB, and the other research group, comparison has been one of the forces that empower your look, perspective in analytical research. Compare as a method, compare as part of enterprise of exegesis, of difference and the differing, né, da diferença e do diferendo. Né? A antropologia é uma ciência comparativa da diferença e do diferente. After all, compare what are the foliant or understand of the world. Né? De uma maneira de desfolhar os princípios que organizam o mundo. That is
it's important to place yourself, to move the world with linguistic, cognitive, and symbolical property that were found in the world, so that we can better notice the elements that are part of the repertoire of words of what belong to the categories for world ontological and existential security. Compare to discomfort your view. Né? A comparação é o desconforto do olhar. Therefore, the myth of these two people is myth of man. It's myth of the global south with the global north along the road of respect and consideration. And the myth of the possibility of overcoming the asymmetry, disregard and the worth treatment that were usually part of this connection. But fortunately, in this case, the third was not. The thread of filia, né? O estabelecimento desse laço, sobretudo pela filia. A thread that's done not to break, né? Fio que se conduz pela filia sem se romper. E nesse caso é o que celebra em grande medida esse simpósio, né? Esse encontro, que é um encontro intelectual, mas igualmente da filia, fundado e estabelecido por esse respeito mútuo e por essa capacidade de diálogo e compreensão que o nosso colega do norte global se coloca intelectual e corporalmente sempre aqui quando esteve conosco. Então é uma honra, né, tê-lo aqui conosco. É uma honra ter aqui o nosso professor emérito, atualmente laureado, né, na Universidade Federal Fluminense, aqui conosco. E é uma honra, né, para mim poder estar aqui com duas figuras e dois personagens tão importantes para a antropologia contemporânea e trazendo aqui reflexões fundamentais para a antropologia, na medida que, como eu disse, não seria a antropologia uma ciência comparativa. Então, sem mais delongas, você fala comigo?
Acho que eu, né?
Eu passo aqui então a palavra para o professor Roberto Kant de Lima, professor titular da Universidade Federal Fluminense, professor emérito da mesma universidade, coordenador do ICHF e INEAC, né, professor do programa de pós-graduação em antropologia, né, uma figura que todos nós conhecemos muito bem, então eu preciso ficar aqui estendendo considerações sobre suas filiações institucionais e, em nome da comissão organizadora, aqui agradecemos a sua presença, Kant, e seu interesse de estar aqui conosco nesse último dia da 14ª reunião de antropologia do Mercosul. E, excuse me, or English.
No worries. I was reading your show.
Bueno, es mejor.
Well, good morning. He thinks I should talk in English because you won't understand if I don't.
Thank you.
And of course I didn't think about it before, and I prepared it in Portuguese, but I'll try to translate it as possible. Well, I have to thank you very much, Fabio, for this invitation, and it was his idea. And of course, I want to thank again George for being here. He is going to be, he has a hard work time here because we have another round table after this one. And after that, he also will have on Monday another intervention at Vega de Almeida, the graduate program in law at the
needed. And okay, well, to talk about anthropology and law, in my specific case, I should say that probably I work on this field because of my biography. I graduated law in Faculdade de Direito de Porto Alegre, Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, and I wasn't very happy. I wasn't happy at all with the law that I learned, because it was very normative and very abstract. And my mother said that I was like Saint Tomé, you know, that I am a way to see in order to believe, ver para crer. And so I came to Rio, where my family, my mother's family lived, and I started working at the financial market, and that was also very arid, very not only very competitive, but competition for what? You know, for money. I wasn't very interested in that. So I came to Niterói, where I had a girlfriend, and she suggested that I should go to a bookstore called Diálogo, which was close to the this institute, which was not here, was at Lara Vilela, where there is a part of communication institute right now. And so I started to have contact with social science and contact with anthropology, and also to establish a intellectual relationship with the so-called anthropology, Niterói Anthropology School, which was something quite anarchical, because it says that you could study, you could research and study anything. You know, there were no prohibitions. And at that time, here, you know, the course, the social science course, undergraduate course, started in 1968, and I entered the course in 1971. I mean, that was in the beginning, and you know, most of the people who are teaching here and are at my generation, they were my colleagues at this undergraduate course. And well, so this was my, let's say, conversion to anthropology. And I decided that I was going to do this, and I went to National Museum, where I at that time, there was a master course, and I started the master course. And there was a coincidence, a very interesting coincidence, that Professor Robert Shirley, who was a professor which was visiting Rio Grande do Sul, was hired for 1 year, I think, or 1 semester, to teach a course at the museum. And the problem is that nobody registered to his course. And then Professor Mota, who was my advisor, told me, look, you better register, because, you know, we hired a man, and, you know, how come no students, you know, for him? And I said, well, but I'm running from law, you know, I'm not interested in this fucking thing, you know. I don't care. Roberto, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you to resist it, okay? So I resisted. And I had a very strange experience because I had contact with bibliography that I didn't know at all. I had never heard of it. This was in 1975. And I was the only student that took, contact with this bibliography because there was no more. So it became a very friendly course, and Professor Schilling was a very nice person, and so I brought him here in Niterói. We ate a lot of fish and caipirinha and whatever, and Melo was together with us. And I got, this idea that there was something called legal anthropology or anthropology of law. Legal anthropology, Robert Schilling later wrote a book called Legal Anthropology, but usually they say legal anthropology when are lawyers who are doing the research or whatever, and anthropology of law when it's done by anthropologists. Anyway, so I also learned, especially the different ways that Anglo-Saxon and French tradition look at the law, because from the point of view of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, any society has law, and even primitive societies, they have law. And from the point of view of this contemporary societies which have civil law, continental law or civil law like ours, law is produced by the state. You see, this is law, and in English, law, lei, and law, direito is the same word, and in Portuguese and other languages, the lei é uma coisa, direito é outra, e direitos são outra coisa que em inglês, which in English are rights. So there's a difference, and this produces a very big difference because of what anthropology of law study. Up to now, sometimes people come to me with French books on anthropology of law, and they are philosophical books, about the meaning of law, the meaning of social control or whatever. They are not ethnographic books because for them, what anthropology of law would study in continental tradition would be some kind of a folklore, kind of customs, you see, which they study what is not the state law, something, the rest of it. And nobody studies the state law at civil. This is a very tricky thing. Anyway, after that, I finished my work in Itaipu, with the fishermen of Itaipu, and then I went to United States to do my PhD. And what happened is that I have what we should call, or was called, cultural shock with the system of social control in the United States, and which today it's very popular in the words of Foucault, which is the disciplinary society. I think that the most disciplinary society is not the French society, it's the American society. And it was absolutely new for me because we were in 1979, we were under dictatorship, and I was used to social control based, funded, and expressed by repression, by prohibition. And in the United States, social control is disciplinary, which means you are not forbidden to tell something, to say something, but to tell it, you have to do in a proper way and according to the options which are available to the person. You see, like the McDonald's sandwich. You see, you get there, you have to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't choose. I want bread and salami. Sandwich, as you do in a bakery here. You see, get there, say, okay, salami. You see, and that's it. And cheese. You can't do that at McDonald's. So freedom for them is not the capacity of doing anything. It's the capacity of doing what is possible for them, because it was something that nobody never told me about this. A lot of people went to the United States, including my colleague today, Professor Roberto da Mata, and nobody told me that about this difference, this brutal difference between two systems of social control. And I decided I was going to work with it. Anyway, and the way I took it first was to try by journey, comparing Brazilian and American, but then after that, it was a long way up, and expanded my work. I did my dissertation in 1986, and to think of an idea, I finished my dissertation in 1986, and I could only talk about the dissertation in an anthropological meeting in 1994 here, when we sponsored, the Brazilian Anthropological Society Association meeting. You see, so it was necessary to have a meeting here for me to get the opportunity of doing this. So I would like to, this is, to make it short, a very long story, but then we started, institutionalizing this kind of anthropology of law, and we created the graduate program in anthropology, and first together with political science, and then 2002 the PhD in anthropology, and we started, graduating doctors and PhDs. So I number here some consequences, let's say, or some results of these long time research done. Always with this contrast, because it's the contrast. I've been also in the United States doing field work, actually worked with George to study. He was a public defender in San Francisco, California, and I did my ethnography there, and in Birmingham, Alabama, with the police department. And so to learn how was the practice of law and the practice of police. And also I did some research, difficult relationships between social science and law in Brazil. This is a big big business. Why? Because, you know, the left in Brazil, which is most of our social science, look at the law as domination. You know? So why you are going to study domination? You know, you have to study the oppression and not domination, because they are used to control by repression. You know? And the law, you know, the people, you know, the way they think, and also the right, thinks that, you know, the law is the way things should be done, you know, it's the only way you should see, the right way of doing things. So this is precious, a lot. And the only way you can understand law in Brazil is doing ethnography, because our law is something, it's a law, but it's not exactly a law, it's a kind of a norm, which is freely interpreted by the judges, you know, which is different from the civil law system in Argentina, in France, and Portugal, where we did research, because there the laws have a consensus of what they mean. The other thing in Brazil is that the judiciary power is a power, which it doesn't happen with the civil law nowhere. The whole civil law, the judiciary is a branch of the administration, of the executive, as we say here. So there's also complication, because they follow the United States tradition with the judiciary, but they are from the continental system. And so there was a very high rejection to this work of studying police and studying law, because they say, you know, my colleagues used to say that there is no empathy. How can you have empathy with police and with law? You see, I didn't have any empathy, on the contrary, you see, but this doesn't stop me of studying it. And Laura Nader has an article, very interesting, study up. Also, there were people who did research with you know, the segregation system in South Africa, you know, but from the point of view of the segregators, you know. So you need to know how these people think, I think, in order to, you know, neutralize their strategies. So the second thing is that legally speaking, they say that there are two kinds of systems of procedure systems, processuais, sistemas processuais, accusatorial and inquisitorial. And Brazil, as usual, has a mixed system, which is not mixed at all. It's an inquisitorial system, but it is, let's say, camouflage, is hidden by some concepts of legal concepts. And in the United States, you have an accusatorial, which means that there is the presumption of innocence, and an accusatorial, an adversarial system, which means that two people, you know, get to the truth better than one people alone. This is what means adversarial in the United States and accusatorial. And the other things that the system, the legal model in the United States looks like cobblestone, parallelepiped, it's solid with cobblestones that you put in the street.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of cobblestones on our way here. So, and they think that, everybody, the society is like that, and everybody can get up by their merits. That's the idea of the legal system. So everybody has equal treatment because everybody has the same rights. And this is kind of a, bourgeoisie revolution, civil 18th century and after that 19th century. And this kind of idea of that everybody has the same rights didn't enter our law, didn't come, was not accepted, because when we became an independent country, we became an empire, which is different from the whole Latin America, and we have slavery, which is also different from most America. That we were the last country to abolish the slavery. So you had slaves, which were not have no rights, civil rights, and only penal, but they could be subject to penalties, but not to rights. And you have nobles and plebeians in our structure. So inequality, it was inside the Brazilians, not only with Portugal, that there is. And with this, the state become the mediator of conflicts, because society is unequal. So there will be conflicts between different segments of societies which have unequal rights. And when this happens, the state enters to administrate conflicts and see, in a preliminary way, to see if the conflict, which is the nature of the conflict, and why is the conflict happening. And this prevalence of the state over society, it's here represented by something called inquérito policial. Since 1871, people from the right, from the law, they say that inquérito policial was something from 1941. That was the dictatorship of Getúlio. But it's not. It's an invention of 1871, which is the same year that was passed a law which said that the slaves from that point on would be free, that were born from that point on would be free. Now, obviously, was a strategy to deal with the repression of this kind of people who were going to be free men, but were not, whites. They were not citizens. Were not people. Even so, I learned a lot of that with Lama Lage, our historian, and with Rosa Cardoso, a lawyer, which is my friend. And Lama Lage, she's a historian specialist in criminal procedure, the history of criminal procedure in the Western society. And Rosa Cardoso, talking to her, she told me, you must read João Mendes de Almeida Jr., which is an author, a jurist, very important jurist, from the passage of the 19th century to the 20th century. And this guy explains everything I'm saying clearly, very clear. Why is this, why is not. That means that the inquisitorial system is linked to an equal rights society. People who have unequal rights. And accusatorial system is linked to societies which, you know, have a legal model of equality.
Yeah.
Despite the fact, because the idea that a lot of people don't know, but the idea of liberal idea is not equality, material equality. It's formal equality, which here in Brazil is a kind of palavrão, you know, it's a kind of a curse, you see, to talk about formal equality. Because you know, formal equality has nothing but material equality only in socialism that you have, you know, Cuba, etc. You have material equality, because if you don't have material equality, and the paradox of liberalism is that we have to have formal equality to justify material equality, because if inequality, right? Because inequality, not because, you know, the market unequals everybody all the time necessarily, and so the law is kind of looking at this inequality. Is looking at this inequality in order to, you know, mediate it, to neutralize it as soon as possible. This is the legal model. I'm not talking about the social thing. I'm doing the ethnography of legal models and of legal practices and why they are the way they are. Well, another problem, and this is a big, maybe the biggest problem, is the translation that Brazilian lawyers did of the principle of accusatorial adversarial principle, which is the idea of the adversarial principle, which means that two people get a better truth than one people. They translate it by contradictorio. And they translate it by this word contradictorio, and then we have in the Constitution the princípio do contradictorio principle. But the principle of contradictorio in Brazil is not the adversarial principle, because the adversarial principle says that people find this truth even agreeing among them. That's possible to have a justice when you agree. And here, the contradictorial principle says that the logic of contradictory actualize the principle of contradictory. So you cannot agree with your adversary, okay? And this is a problem because, you know, science is built up consensus, you know, temporary consensus, but consensus, you know. This is the way we build science. We made the research, we say the method we use, we write a paper, and we submit the paper to people. And people say, you know, colleagues or superiors or colleagues, you know, teachers or colleagues, say, well, your paper is good. You can publish it, or you can go on doing this kind of thing. So, primarily, the principle that puts science, you know, on is agreement of your peers. And in law in Brazil, it's on the contrary. You know, the truth is good when it's given by third person, because it's the third person that chooses who wins and who loses in this kind of contradictory thing. So with this, you have never consensus among the facts. And what happens? You have different versions of the same thing, which is possible to have versions against the facts. Because in Brazil, different from the English, where the word fact means that, you know, if I say that a word is a fact, that something is a fact, it's because there is a consensus that this is a fact. I cannot translate in English the expression, Brazilian expression that eu estou procurando a verdade dos fatos. It's impossible to translate this. Ô, seu Chico, prazer. Pô, tô falando inglês, seu Chico, tá foda essa.
Senta aí, seu Chico.
Senta aí, vou lugar aí, seu Chico. Seu Chico é meu amigo, colega, e é o meu professor lá de Itaipu, que quando eu cheguei lá, ele tinha 18 anos, o professor era natalino, mas ele era um discípulo natalino, então ele me ensinou esses anos todos isso aí. Aliás, a minha pesquisa lá de Itaipu, o Chico vai fazer 50 anos, né? No ano que, em 2025. Fiquei apavorado quando alguém me disse isso. Deu um cacete, rapaz, eu tô muito velho, né? Pouco velho. Ele é muito mais novo que eu, de modo que isso não cola só em mim. Anyway, so what happens is that the law builds its knowledge by the contradictory, I'm finished, by contradictory discussions. And that means that the what they call law theory is not a theory, it's a doctrine. And a doctrine is an opinion. And an opinion, you know, when you have a shock of opinions, you know, one win and the other lose. There is no agreement with this kind of thing. And the problem is that at legal school, at law school, we learn that the theory in practice is another one. I mean, they tell us, look, the theory is one thing, and the practice, the law practice, is another completely different thing. And you have to learn, you know, both things to, you know. And the problem is that doctrine is not theory. And when social scientists study law, or study law practices, or do it not, they think that we are doing theory. And theory has nothing to do with practice. And so our knowledge, our theoretical knowledge, is unusable for them, because it's just our opinion. And this is the most important obstacle, you know, it's an epistemological obstacle to talk with lawyers and talk with people who are from law in Brazil, which is not what happens in the United States, where also not only law, but the science are produced by consensus. So that's the idea. It's the same thing, provisorial consensus. After he's telling me that I have 5 minutes, I'm going to finish and saying that there is also a naturalization in Brazil of the unequal treatment among different segments. When you go to the police, you go to the justice, etc., depends on your status, social status, the treatment you're going to receive, and not from the subject or the crime or the civil subject that are being discussed. And this contaminates police work. As we're seeing, you know, lately, you know, people killing, the police killing people in a way that, I mean, a natural way, as if it were natural for the police to kill people just because they are criminals, or they are being accused of criminals, not only criminals, but accused of criminals. And this is a very problematic thing in Brazil, which I'm confronting here, which is that the problem is not only in the police force, the problem is in the legal system and the judicial system. So, and while sociologists, political scientists, anthropologists would understand that, we won't be able to touch this effects of this terrible tradition, which is the tradition of inequality before the law. And thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Well, I didn't say that George helped me a lot all these years, not only with my research in 1990, but with his companionship and his friendship. And I am still marveled with his, artistic qualities that he gave us a little bit in a show, a blues show that he performed in yesterday evening in Botafogo, and up to midnight. So we were a little bit affected today, and we have to work a lot. But I have to thank a lot George and another friend also, which is a very good friend, but not so frequent here, which is James Ferguson. These were my friends when I was doing my PhD, and I learned a lot about the United States and about friendship with them. Thank you.
Dizia que esse simpósio é o simpósio da celebração dos encontros. Então tenho o enorme prazer agora de apresentar o professor, na verdade igualmente músico, grande músico, ganhador inclusive de prêmios nos Estados Unidos, tocando blues, mas igualmente também antropólogo, professor, formado em mestrado em História da Georgetown University, graduado em Antropologia pela Universidade de Berkeley e feito seu... Não, graduado e doutorado em Antropologia pela Universidade de Harvard University. O professor Jorge Bisharat foi igualmente defensor público da cidade de São Francisco, de 87 a 91, publicou vários livros sobre o tema, e a partir de 91 se tornou professor da Faculdade de Direito de uma das mais prestigiosas universidades americanas, University College of the Law, na Califórnia, e é igualmente um intelectual público muito importante na denúncia e na crítica das violências perpetradas pelo Estado israelense e palestino. Tem um papel muito importante como antropólogo, intelectual que estuda os grandes nomes, os grandes estudiosos sobre a Palestina, e igualmente um dos grandes personagens intelectuais, políticos no debate sobre essa temática. Então é um enorme prazer, George. Welcome. Com você a palavra.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's always a lovely experience to be here at UFE. I was delighted when my friend Fabio here invited us to offer some informal reflections on the fruits of this multi-year academic exchange between my home institution, which is the University of California College of the Law in San Francisco. It used to be called UC Hastings, and why the name has been recently changed is a topic that I'll be addressing in a couple of days in another talk. It's very interesting. But we've been having this exchange between my home institution and UFE INEAC for 12 or so years, 15 years maybe. And it's been a joyful experience, honestly, on multiple dimensions. And I'm going to talk about the human dimension of these exchanges, the musical dimension of the exchanges, and then I think what you probably most expected to hear this morning, the academic. So I will indeed spend the most time talking about the academic richness that has been produced by these exchanges. But these prior to the human and the musical are also worthy of brief mention. When I do get to the academic, I'm going to focus on three things. By coincidence, they all start in English with the letter C. So I'm going to talk about comparison. And here I mean the rich insights that can be gained through comparative research, including what might be called negative comparison, or comparison of differences, as well as similarities. So that's the first C. The second C is convergence. This is, you might say, a subset or a byproduct of comparison, which entails the observation that dissimilar social forms can produce or manifest like or similar social constructions. And then the final C is for collaboration. And here I'm talking about the similarities in ideologies and practices between social and political groups that are not simply the product of forces internal to respective societies. So they're not just an example of convergence, as I was mentioning earlier. Rather, they are the result of conscious and deliberate mimicry, either across movements or sometimes across borders, and even perhaps involving active transnational consultation and or instruction between these groups. And this is a phenomenon that I have recently been examining among right-wing organizations and groups in a number of different countries. But I don't imagine that it is only true of such right-wing organizations. So those are the three C's that I'll get to. But let me start with the human aspects of this exchange. We are academics, of course, but we are not simply disembodied brains floating in some clear liquid over society, coldly analyzing it. No, we are very much embodied. We eat, we drink, we laugh, we make music, we do many things other than our academic work. And of course, this exchange has been intensely human. The trips that I have made to Mario's here in Niterói for fish dinners have been every bit as enriching as all of the intellectual exchanges that have happened there and all over this amazing country where I've been privileged to travel. And of course, I cherish the friendships that have been founded or strengthened through my visits here and through your visits to me in California. Part of this is because the first time I stepped onto this campus about 12 years ago, I don't remember exactly how long it's been, but I immediately sensed the vibrancy and the urgency of your work. And in a funny way, despite the vast differences in physical setting, I felt like I was back in Palestine. As you may or may not know, Palestine is where my father came from and where I have spent much of my time doing research and writing. So, you know, why did I feel like I was back in Palestine when I came here? You know, the physical settings could hardly be more different. You're next to the water here, and it's tropical and humid, and there it's dry and rocky, at least the parts where I spent my time. A very different physical setting. But what I saw here was faculty and students striving under less than ideal, less than super privileged circumstances, unlike, for example, Harvard, where Roberto and I originally met. And you were striving for educational excellence. And what I sensed was that for you, research and learning were urgent necessities in the face of acute and pressing social problems. So what you do matters to people and to the society around you. And you are willing to take risks, including in some cases to your physical well-being, to address the problems that you are confronting. And I know that these risks were mounting during the years of the Bolsonaro government with its systematic attacks on and defunding of higher education. So dealing with a hostile state and hostile other forces in civil society, that is how life is for us as Palestinians. And in my case, as a Palestinian American operating in the US academic world. What I have faced personally is systematic discrimination and institutional bias aimed at silencing expression about Palestine and the Palestinian people. And I could spend hours recounting to you examples of my experience of this repressive force. Now, what I deal with in the United States, of course, is only the palest version of what my Palestinian brothers and sisters, academics, living and trying to do research under Israeli apartheid, what they face is a much more physical peril and much more dire threat than I have to do. But witnessing your courage and your willingness to take risks has been inspiring. And so, of course, I jumped at the opportunity to show solidarity with you. I saw in you something of myself, people struggling not only to understand social life, but also striving to make life better, more just, more secure for more people. And of course, you have answered my offer of solidarity with one of your own. You have embraced me and my work, and I have grown to cherish that as a deeply meaningful gift. You've listened intently and respectfully to what I've had to say. You have offered me total freedom in my choices of topics to share with you. And you have also invited me to address issues that I might not have otherwise looked into. And therefore, you have made me a better and more rounded scholar. So, thank you. Now, as to the musical level, I was passingly familiar with Brazilian music before my first visit here. As a kid, growing up in the United States, I had heard the famous musical collaboration between the American jazz musician Stan Getz and your João Gilberto. You couldn't grow up in the United States in the 1960s without being exposed to this. It was everywhere. And then in the 1980s, I attended an amazing live performance by Gilberto Gil, who I became an immediate fan and followed avidly for many years. But coming here has greatly deepened my exposure and appreciation for the incredible musical traditions of this nation. I've been moved by the musicality of everyone from a guitar player in the lobby of my hotel in Manaus to your superstars like Ana Carolina or Angela Jojo and many in between. If you've listened to my music, starting from my second album, which is called Wash My Horse in Champagne, you know that I have been incorporating Brazilian influences into my music. The album title, Wash My Horse in Champagne, the album title comes from a song by that name. And the music in that song, and in particular the bass line, was inspired by a tune from Vitor Ramil. And the lyrics of the song reference the history of the city of Manaus. And it sort of builds on the tale of one of the rubber barons, one of the very, very wealthy people from the rubber industry that developed in the late 19th and early 20th century in Manaus. And he was reputed to, in order to show off his wealth, to wash his horses in champagne. So, now, it may or may not be to your taste how I have, what I have done with these Brazilian influences. You might hear them as, a violation of a sacrilege, because I've done, I've taken elements and transformed them, and that particular song I turned into a kind of a blues song with blues chord progressions and that sort of thing. I mean, sorry, Victor, if you're offended by what I did to your song, but for me and for the musicians that I record with, it has been like a breath of fresh air. In fact, the guitarist who played with me on that song, Wash My Horse in Champagne, he was one of the top blues artists, blues guitarists in the United States before his death in 2020. And he, as it turned out, had a secret love of choro, or chorinho. His name was Little Charlie Baby. And he told me when I had him play on this song that this was the first time that he had ever been invited to record on acoustic guitar. He almost, before he sort of stopped within the blues idiom and had never really had a chance to express himself in another way. So all of my musicians have felt this sense of liberation. This is what they tell me, from the confines of the blues genre by these Brazilian-oriented songs that we have done together. The fan response has also been very good. Sometimes people have narrow expectations of what blues is supposed to be, and if they hear something different, they go, "That's not blues," But fan response has also been good. And I have always made a point when I present the songs, when I play them in live performance, to explain to the audiences where some of the inspiration comes from, in the hopes that they will discover for themselves some of the great Brazilian artists who have so inspired me. And of course, I've also had the pleasure of learning about the thriving blues scene here in Brazil and getting to know and to play with Brazilian blues stars like Igor Prado of Sao Paulo. And of course, your own Fabio Guimarães, whose band I had the pleasure of playing with last night. Okay, now to the serious part, the academic level. And I'm going to start with the first C, comparison. So by now, our collective academic exchanges have included a wide variety of topics. We've addressed plea bargaining in both countries, the United States and Brazil. We have talked about drug or research drug policies specifically, and crime policies more generally. The latter is the topic of my talk in the next session. We have looked at, and I just mean by all of us who have been involved in these exchanges, have looked at the roles of medical examiners in the categorization of homicides. We have looked at juvenile justice, or the treatment of young people by the criminal justice systems. We've looked at mediation in civil cases. We have looked at international law and human rights. And now, recently, we have been together, I have been together with scholars from here, looking at the role of private violence in settler colonial societies. Private violence being violence committed not by agents of the state, but by private individuals, militias, or simply individuals. Now, in terms of the exchange of personnel, those were the topics that I just listed. I have been here, I think this might be my 6th or 7th visit, so you have hosted me many times, and you have facilitated my travel from the south of this country to the north, and I have hosted many of you. I was going to list the names, but since they're not all here in the room, Michelle here was one of the people I hosted, and of course, El Maestro, Roberto, and others. And the studies that we have covered, the countries that we have looked at include the United States, Brazil, Palestine, Argentina, Mexico, and other countries in Latin America. Much of this work has been done in an explicitly comparative framework, but almost all of it has been done against a backdrop of comparison. Whether the comparison has been in the forefront or not, it has always been there. And I would say that our approach has been both open-minded and open-ended, meaning that the societies that we have compared are each clearly quite distinct with unique characteristics, but also with broad similarities. And to me, our work together has demonstrated the value of both, that is, both similarities and differences. Now, out of all of this work, for me, perhaps the most unexpected observation is the possibility of convergence, the second C that I told you I would cover. And by that I mean the production of similar social phenomena through different social constructions or circumstances. And the example that I will offer you comes from the meetings that we had we attended an international law and society meeting, and we gathered in Mexico City in 2017. And we had presentations from, we had a presentation about the Rio de Janeiro State Police treatment of juveniles in the favelas around Rio. These were described and analyzed by Lucia Ailton from here. And we had a presentation of the treatment of Palestinian youths by Israeli police in East Jerusalem by the Palestinian scholar Nadira Shalhoub-Kevorkian. I think I was not the only one to be struck by the almost interchangeable character of these two presentations. It was, despite the very considerable differences between this country, for example, with the legacy of slavery, and Palestine, that is a situation of military occupation and annexation of territory in a settler colonial society. These are quite different, but it was as if Nadira and Lucia were speaking about almost identical things. I've been noticing a number of convergences in our recent work on the role of private violence in settler colonial societies. Just to give you one more example, I can't dwell on this, but I was reading about the settlement of the Amazon region here in Brazil in the 1980s under the military government, and their use of a phrase to kind of justify what was going on, the displacement of indigenous people, the building of roads and highways, and the settlement there of settlers, not the indigenous people. And the use of the phrase was a land without people for a people without land. Now, when I read that, my jaw dropped, because this is exactly word for word the expression that was used by the Zionist movement when it was settling Palestine in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A land without people or a people without land. Obviously, in this construction, there were, of course, in both cases, people on that land, and they were simply erased in this, in this construction. But it was, the specificity of this similarity was very striking. And there are more, but those are just a couple of examples of what I'm talking about as convergence. Now, one of the things that, one of the, not conclusions, but one of the implications, I think, of this comparison and the phenomenon of convergence is, to me at least, it suggested the need for some humility about our understandings of causality. If social phenomena can be produced by two rather different social contexts and histories, this raises question about the necessity of each step or factor that you might have thought of as a link in the causal chain producing the phenomenon, right? If it can be produced in two different ways, then which steps are actually essential to bring about the phenomenon. But it also, I think, points us in the direction of perhaps a deeper and better understanding of causality in supralocal phenomena. If you lift your gaze from the specifics of a circumstance that you're studying and see that the same phenomenon is occurring elsewhere, then it points you in the direction of understanding better what forces are really at work, which may be much larger than you had originally expected, okay? So that, I think, is a very, very productive consequence of this comparative work. Now, recently I've been thinking more about the possibility that the similarities that we are observing are not simply the the product of internal forces in two different places. They may start that way. They may start as local products, but they may also be furthered by direct exchanges between like-minded individuals and groups across societies. In other words, this is the third C, or collaboration. And what triggered my thinking in this direction was a recent exchange with Roberto, in which he shared with me a WhatsApp communication from a group of right-wing figures in Brazil, but it actually originated in California, and it was a description of the problems, of the challenges of the city of San Francisco in dealing with crime, and basically deriding and making fun of the the efforts that had been enacted by progressive prosecutors trying to address these things, trying to address these problems, the question that this provoked in my mind was how much of the observed similarities between the behaviors and the rhetoric of right-wing parties in the U.S. and Brazil are just, coincidences or convergences, to use my term, and how much are they the product of exchanges of information and essentially educational exchanges. In other words, right-wing forces and parties in different countries talking with each other, sharing perspectives on messaging, and teaching each other tactics to gain or maintain, as the case may be, political power. In other words, the question is, where does convergence stop and collaboration take over as the explanation for similar right-wing rhetoric and practices around the globe? And it has struck me that collaboration may be a more significant factor than we have previously realized. Of course, we're aware of the way in which, for example, Bolsonaro here, the Trump of the tropics, as he was called, observed Trump's behavior in the United States, and then directly mimicked that behavior. We had our January 6th of 2021, in which right-wing people stormed the U.S. Capitol. You had your January 8th of 2023, in which followers of Bolsonaro essentially did the same in Brasilia. So I have another case study that let me just mention it. This is another example of collaboration. It involves two right-wing ethno-nationalist groups that are affiliated with outside powers. So I'm speaking about something that's occurring within the United States, but it does involve transnational ties. And what I'm talking about is the cooperation and collaboration between Zionist supporters of Israel on the one hand, and Indian American supporters of Hindutva, or Hindu nationalism, and particularly people who are loyal to the party and the government of Narendra Modi in India. So what's going on here is the adoption by Hindu nationalists of a rather specific pro-Israel or Zionist tactic that is not, as it turns out, just coincidence or convergence, or even for that matter, simple mimicry. It is in fact the product of direct collaboration and tutelage, that is teaching of the tactics. And it has to do with the development of a notion of what they are calling Hindu phobia. Now, let me just back up and quickly explain that in the United States, the supporters of Israel have made a very effective practice of construing criticism of Israel and of Israeli government politics as a form of anti-Semitism, racial hatred against Jews. And this has been done through the adoption and promotion of a definition of anti-Semitism that originally was made by something called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Alliance. Okay, so this definition, through a number of examples that it offers, it has this rather vague definition of what anti-Semitism is, and then it's followed by a number of examples showing what anti-Semitism is, and criticism of Israel basically is among those examples. There are several of the examples that have to do with criticism of Israel. For example, saying that Israel is comparing it to the Nazi regime, or denying the Jewish people the right to national self-determination. These are in fact political criticisms or objections, but they are being construed as racism, as a form of anti-Semitism. And this definition has been promoted by pro-Israel forces in the United States for adoption, formal adoption by a number of official agencies, ranging from the State Department to the state governments, and to the Office of Education, the Department of Education, which looks at, it has responsibility over claims of discrimination in educational institutions in the United States. So the implications of this are really quite important. And it turns out that the Hindu nationalists, and represented by an organization called the Hindu American Foundation, is sitting with members of the pro-Israel groups from the, I won't name them for you, they're kind of irrelevant to you, but directly studying what the pro-Israel forces have done, and have tried to do the same thing with the development of this concept of Hinduphobia, which they are using to defend against any criticisms of in the United States of Hindu nationalism, Hindu supremacist national ideology, which involves not just the promotion of Hindu nationalism, but also the suppression of Indian Muslims, right? Not only rhetorical, but also physical and violent. So this is another example of the convergence, of collaboration taking over and producing identity of tactics, not just sort of general similarity. Now, I could be accused rightfully at this point of selecting, cherry-picking evidence from here and there and putting it together as if it were some. Please, I want you to understand, first of all, that the rise of right-wing populism is a serious, I'm almost done, is a serious study. People have written books about it, and I don't mean to trivialize it by cherry-picking a few examples. All I'm doing, really, honestly, at this point is marking out, laying markers for further research, maybe for myself, maybe for some of you. It's just kind of a notion that I have begun to think about as a consequence of our exchanges that could lead in a productive direction. Now, let me finish by stating something that is probably obvious, that none of this would have happened were it not for my dear colleague, and more importantly, my dear friend of more than 40 years, Roberto. He has been an inspiration to me. You have been an inspiration to me. And I know to many of you too. he has shown how big a difference one person can make in a life by his, or direct view, by your boundless energy, your humanity, your brilliance, and your humor. You have made an incredible difference here and in many other places. May all of you be as him. Because if you are, the world, with all of its very acute troubles, will be a much better place. Thank you.
Por essa apresentação tão sensível, antropológica e humanamente falando. Very, very good. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Nós temos um tempo curto, porque os dois colegas, inclusive, têm uma mesa em seguida, mas em consideração ao público aí que está conosco, agradecer a todos e todas. A gente pode abrir para perguntas, questões, pelo menos uma rodada. E assim, rápido, por favor, né? As pessoas que forem fazer suas intervenções, façam de forma sucinta. That's its point. Né? E aí a gente pode abrir a rodada, quem tiver interesse, alguém queria fazer alguma questão, alguma pergunta, por favor.
I have a question. You mentioned collaboration about the comparison of the identification of medical categorization of homicide.
I mentioned, yes, I mentioned that as one of the topics that has been researched comparatively between here and the United States. And that work was done by Fabio Madero.
Fabio.
Yeah, and she did her initial research here, and then she came and spent a year in San Francisco, and I sort of helped guide her research toward some of the people she knew.
Okay, I wanted to know which text.
Yeah, that would be, she would be the one to.
Okay,
Yeah.
Primeiro, obrigada pelo simpósio especial, porque a gente ouviu os dois autores, muito claros. I have a question also about the last two C's. First I excuse myself because I am only recently being socialized with the methodology of the first C, of the negative comparison. And so my question would be, like, what is the nature of such a step of humbly lifting one's gaze to be able to identify similarities, and then through that be able to problematize local causality and be able to identify collaboration? And how does one do that without compromising negative comparison, or how does one lift such a gaze? What the procedure would be like? What is the nature of such a step?
Well, I mean, I think it's, I think it involves letting go first. The first step is letting go of the idea that you have to, kind of limit variables. This is a very, kind of positivist social scientific idea that you have to kind of narrow down a comparison so that you can identify the single variable that's accounting for whatever phenomenon you're looking at. And instead, what you have to do is say, I'm going to forget that for the time being. What I described as open-ended comparison was, what I meant was going into the comparison without any necessary expectation of what would come of it. But then I think the identification of both similarities and differences is not the hard part. I think once you start doing a comparison, then those things begin to emerge, right? And that's the stage at which, as you start to see those similarities and differences arise, that's the stage at which you start trying to figure out why, and to lift your case, so to speak. So, you know, what that means is, in more concrete terms, is either doing some comparative research yourself on a topic that interests you, and without obsessing over, you know, you can start almost anywhere, and it can be either through your own work, or it can be through engagement with scholars who are looking at, you know, what you're looking at. That's the best answer that I can
Bem, gostaria mais uma vez de agradecer a George, o Kant, porque penso eu que a antropologia ela é uma disciplina na qual a comparação ela cumpriria um papel fundamental do ponto de vista de desembotar os nossos espíritos das certezas, pois elas nos servem muito como uma forma de desorientação das nossas categorias de entendimento, e particularmente no mundo contemporâneo, atual, no qual nós vivemos, me parece muito alvissareiro esse trabalho comparativo, na medida que, em certa forma, da pior forma possível, hoje me parece que nos encontramos no carrefour da história, sociedades do primeiro mundo, do norte global e do sul global, em vários aspectos. Quando eu olho, por exemplo, etnograficamente a França, onde eu tenho um maior envolvimento, desenvolvimento etnográfico e igualmente corporal, fazendo pesquisas lá, mas que me parece igualmente algo que se procede, né, nos Estados Unidos, mediante a tudo que se tem vivenciado, né, as últimas crises vivenciadas da democracia americana, particularmente com o fenômeno do Trump, e que viabiliza muito, do meu ponto de vista, né, com que aquilo que se desenvolveu e que Kant aqui apresenta quanto à lógica do contraditório, da inquisitorialidade, transferirmos esses instrumentos analíticos elaborados para pensar as nossas sociedades, as sociedades do sul global, mas para igualmente hoje transladarmos essas categorias analíticas para compreendermos o que tem se passado nessas sociedades que hoje vivenciam uma enorme crise das suas democracias, e o que me parece nesse sentido muito rico, né, essa possibilidade de usarmos esses instrumentos que nós formulamos aqui na antropologia brasileira, e particularmente nessa tradição daquela que Kant denominou da escola antropológica de Niterói, né, para podermos trabalhar nesse exercício de comparação e nesse exercício de conexões entre perspectivas, entre olhares, na medida em que, de uma forma ou de outra, embora sejamos muito diferentes, estamos todos aqui nesse planeta e pensamos que, portanto, seja necessário colocarmos várias mentes de vários lugares, do norte, do sul, do oeste, do leste, global, para refletirmos sobre o modo como poderemos mudar, né, o nosso rumo, que, infelizmente, não nos parece um rumo muito promissor, mas seguramente, como a história, né, não para, ou como dizia o velho Cazuza, o velho poeta, o tempo não para, só o futuro nos dirá, né? Mas certamente é importante que, como indivíduos, professores, professoras, antropólogos, antropólogas, intelectuais, acadêmicos, façamos a nossa parte, e acho que essa parte hoje foi cumprida, de buscarmos aqui, colocarmos duas grandes figuras, dois grandes pensadores a nos apresentar questões extremamente instigantes e interessantes para refletirmos sobre os problemas da modernidade, da contemporaneidade. Agradeço enormemente a você, Kant. Thank you very much, George. Foi um prazer enorme. E, se querem falar alguma última palavra,
eu quero. Eu ontem tive uma mesa aqui sobre a Academia de Ciências e houve uma pergunta sobre mais ou menos assim, né, que a ciência social, qual é o lugar dela, né, quais são as opções que os cientistas sociais têm, etc. E eu não tinha que terminar, né, a sessão e tal, eu acabei não falando, mas eu queria frisar o seguinte, quer dizer, quando o George recebeu essas pessoas lá nos Estados Unidos, né, e a Sofia Tiscornia na Argentina, o XIV, o Coordenador depois na França, o Zé Rezende em Portugal, os colegas que foram, né, nessas bolsas sanduíche, inclusive oriundas todas do governo Lula, né, que foi quem fez esses convênios todos e tal, porque depois com a Dilma ela acabou com isso, fez o negócio de ciência sem fronteira, que foi uma maluquice completa. Eles todos foram atrás de uma coisa que eu experimentei na minha vivência nos Estados Unidos, na França, etc., de que você, para entender uma sociedade, entender teorias sociológicas, teorias antropológicas, etc., você tem que conhecer a sociedade onde ela foi produzida. Porque essas teorias não são universais. Essas teorias são construídas em cima de contextos, que é o que ele está dizendo, né? E se você não conhece o contexto e vai aplicar a teoria, você, né, aquele negócio fica por isso mesmo e, né, às vezes está certo, às vezes não dá e tal. E em geral o que não está certo é a realidade, né? Quem queria que não está certo, porque a teoria está certa, imagina. Então eu insisti sempre muito que a gente não só escrevesse textos para publicar no exterior, mas que a gente conhecesse as academias do exterior, né? Fosse a esses lugares para entender como é que os nossos colegas pensam, né? E por que eles pensam do jeito que eles pensam. E eu acho que esse esforço foi bem recompensado, porque houve um resultado bastante significativo, tanto na Argentina, quanto na França, quanto nos Estados Unidos, né, dos colegas que empreenderam essa viagem, né? Uma viagem que não é só física, né, mas é também uma viagem intelectual. E a segunda coisa que eu quero dizer é o seguinte, que eu acho que a universidade não tem que produzir pessoas para o mercado. Eu acho que a universidade tem que criar oportunidades de mercado exatamente onde essas coisas precisam existir, né? Então aqui, por exemplo, que nós trabalhamos com essa coisa árida, que é o direito e a segurança pública, nós estamos criando, estamos interferindo no mercado da segurança pública, né, que é controlado pelos militares, os policiais militares, as pessoas das Forças Armadas e, né, pelos juristas. Nós estamos interferindo nisso e introduzindo novos profissionais com outro ponto de vista. Então eu acho que a gente tem que criar mercado, não tem que ficar querendo fazer o que o mercado quer que a gente faça, né? Que aí é mole. Então daí não muda nada. Muito obrigado, George, pelas suas palavras. Thank you very much for your words. Thank you, Fabio, for being here. And thank you all for being here all this time, listening to us and waiting for our